Hello everyone, it's Kevin, and welcome back to another tutorial video. In this video, I'll be showing you how you can use Moonbeam's batch precompile to perform a very common set of transactions together in one click. In particular, I'll be performing an approval and a swap transaction in one single action. And Moonbeam's batch precompile allows you to combine multiple EVM transactions together into a single transaction. This improves the user experience and it can reduce gas fees. The batch precompile has a couple of different methods, 3 to be exact, that attempt to execute the provided subcalls in a slightly different manner. And this allows you to intelligently group your transactions based on your use case. Every method of the batch precompile takes the exact same parameters, so all you need to do is choose which method you'd like to use. Batch sum will try to execute all of the subcalls you provided, regardless of whether any of the subcalls fail. If one fails, or more than one fails, it will ignore it and keep trying the following subcalls. Batch sum until failure will try to execute all of the subcalls until one fails, at which point no further subcalls will be attempted. However, the prior successful calls will not be reverted. Batch all requires all of the subcalls to succeed, otherwise everything fails. You can think of this as the all or nothing batch method. If one of the subcalls fails, then the entire batch transaction fails, and prior successful subcalls are reverted. And I do believe that batch all makes the most sense for this approval and swap demo that we'll be doing. It only makes sense to try to execute the swap if you know that the approval was successful. And likewise, it only makes sense to grant the approval in the first place if you know that the swap will be successful. This not only improves the user experience, but this is a safer experience for the end user as well. Many dApps on Ethereum have a tendency to grant unlimited token approvals to save funds on gas and spare users a click, but this is a dangerous proposition. With a batch precompile, you don't have to compromise safety to improve the user experience. Now, one thing to note today is that we're demonstrating combining both approval and swap transactions. Some DEXs on Moonbeam now offer signature approvals in place of an approval transaction. So just remember that we're demonstrating combining two interactions where both the approval and the swap are EVM transactions. You can also follow along with all the steps that we're taking in this video in a written tutorial that is available on the Moonbeam docs site underneath the tutorials and the Ethereum API and the Interact with Precompiles section. You'll also find a link to this tutorial in the video description. In this tutorial, we'll go over how you can batch transactions together with the batch precompile. We'll deploy an ERC20 token contract and a simple DEX contract to Moonbase Alpha. This demo does assume that you have a working Hardhat project set up already. If you don't, you can just follow the quick steps that are available here. Also, make sure that you install the necessary dependencies. We are going to have a couple different contracts here to facilitate our demo, and I'll just briefly go ahead and run through them. You'll need to copy the batch precompile into your project. We also have a demo ERC20 token, and that's going to be deployed right alongside our simple DEX contract. And it also has two methods that allow for swapping. Now, because we want to demo the approval and the swap, the method that we're most interested in is to swap demo ERC20 tokens to dev tokens. So we have a deploy.js file. This is going to deploy our simple DEX, which will then in turn deploy our demo ERC20 token. Our swap.js file here, this is where most of the action is going to take place. You'll need to input the address of your simple DEX contract here. That will be printed out after we go ahead and deploy our simple DEX. We have a simple method here called check balances. This is a helper method that's going to print out the balances so that we know that our swap was successful and we can see the balances at the end. And I want to draw your attention to batch.sol here. So of course we need to input the address of the batch.sol precompile, and we do need to specify, of course, a value that we want to swap. Then we prepare the approval call data by using the encode function data method, and we're going to pass it all of the necessary parameters, including the name of the function. We're going to pass it the spender as well as the amount. We then prepare the call data for swap demo token for dev that we'll be initiating. Now note that the amount of both the approval and the swap is the same. Finally, we arrive at our batch all method. Batch all, like all methods of the batch precompile, takes 4 parameters where each parameter is an array and the elements of the array correspond to each subcall. So the first parameter here is an array of 2 addresses. So for the approval transaction, we are going to be interacting with the demo ERC20 token contract itself, whereas in the swap transaction, we're going to be sending that transaction to the simple DEX address. Next, we have the value of the native token to send. We're not going to be sending any tokens along with that, so we just need to include an open and a close bracket as a placeholder here. Otherwise, the transaction will fail. Next, we arrive at call data. So we're going to specify here our approval call data and our swap call data that we already prepared above here. And lastly, we have our gas limit here. And this is if you want to individually specify a gas limit for each subcall. We don't want to do that now, and that's beyond the scope of this video, but you can read more about how that works on the batch precompile page on the Moonbeam docs site. In this tutorial, we've demoed everything using Hardhat, but you can integrate this same concept using a signer like MetaMask so that your users can be prompted with a batch transaction and you can give them a wonderful user experience. Let's go ahead and start running our demo. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and run our deploy script. That's going to deploy our simple DEX as well as our demo ERC20 token. So we can do that with the following command. Cool, and we've got our simple DEX contract address here. Let's go ahead and copy this into our swap.js file here. Then we'll go ahead and run our swap script. And we can do that with the following command. And that's it. The batch precompile is that easy. We have here the transaction hash for the approval and the swap, and we of course have the balances, both of the DEX and the account that was interacting with this. So that's my account that I used here. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.